Viktor Gyökeres' goal record speaks for itself. Arsenal finally have their out-and-out centre forward, but how do we unlock him and ensure that we're getting the maximum out of our new number 14? That's the focus of today's Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Let's get into it. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the pod. Hope you're all good. Hope you're all having a wonderful week so far. On today's episode, we're focusing on Viktor Gyökeres. How do we unlock him? How do we get the maximum out of him? I think there's a few things that need to be tweaked in Arsenal's tactical setup to ensure that we are maximizing what we have in that centre forward role. Now, over the last couple of days, I've had a fair few messages and comments from regular listeners saying, Harry, you've turned really negative. You're really, really unhappy. And you're overreacting to what we've seen in pre-season. Look, I don't mean to be negative. I don't mean to overreact. In fact, I don't think I have overreacted. I've simply, in my opinion, expressed my concerns and my worries going into the new season. But let me just be clear. Everything that I complain about or am seen to be complaining about, it comes from one place, the place where I really, really want to see Arsenal win and get over the line. And I know we're so close. And it's why even the smallest things can frustrate me at times because I know we're not far away. This has been a long, hard graft to get to where we are today. And I just don't want to see us drop the ball when we're this close. So instead of complaining about something, I'm not going to complain about the way that Arsenal utilized Viktor Gyökeres against Villarreal. I said after the game that Viktor Gyökeres is clearly not up to speed fitness-wise, and hopefully he's going to get more minutes against Athletic Club on Saturday evening to kind of build him up to closer to where we need him to be. Rather than complain about that. And I don't feel I overreacted about Viktor Gyökeres. I made lots of points around why it's understandable that we kind of struggled to find him. I thought it was to do with the midfield. I thought it was to do with him on a sort of physical level. But I have no doubts that this was the right signing and that Arsenal are going to get the best out of Viktor Gyökeres in time. So what I thought I'd do is be constructive today. Rather than sit and talk about all the things that we didn't do, I'm going to focus on the things that we should do and the things that we can do in order to unlock Viktor Gyökeres' potential. Because if we unlock him, it will make the world of difference. We've talked for such a long time about Arsenal lacking that out-and-out number 9. Well, now we've got one, but we haven't had one for such a long time that it feels like our patterns of play are not necessarily tailored to a player of that profile. So we've got to make some adjustments. Now, it's not just for Viktor Gyökeres to change and adapt to the new team and to his new surroundings. It's for the Arsenal players, the rest of the players to adapt and adjust. And it's for Mikel Arteta to adapt and adjust and tweak certain things in order to ensure that everybody is performing at their maximum. That's the job of a manager. We talk a lot about bringing players in, the buzz, the excitement of signing X player, Y player. But the hardest part as a manager is not identifying talents. We all have access to lots of stats. The clubs will have even more than you or I. We all have access to footage. We all have access to lots of football nowadays. You can spot a talent. But the art and the beauty of it is trying to once you've brought that talent in, once you've identified that talent and then progressed and done a deal, is integrating them into what you already have and ensuring that you extract the maximum. So that's what we're going to do on today's pod. We're going to focus on how Arsenal unlock Viktor Gyökeres. And I want to start off by kind of reflecting on the Villarreal game in one sense, just because there was one glaring issue for me. And so I want to make sure that we cover that. But I want to start off by talking about the midfield that played against Villarreal. Now, this is not the team. The team on your screens is not the team that played against Villarreal. This is the team that I think could well start at Old Trafford on the opening weekend. So for those of you listening, I've gone Raya in goal, White, Saliba, Kivior, and Lewis Skelly. At the time of recording, I don't know of any injury problems. I'd imagine that the midfield would be Zubimendi at the base, Rice playing left 8, Odegaard playing right 8, and then Saka and Martinelli on either flank with Viktor Gyökeres through the middle. And post Villarreal, right, there was a lot of talk about the midfield. There was a lot of talk that the midfield that we played at the same time that Viktor Gyökeres was on the pitch wasn't necessarily the one that we'd expect to start once the Premier League comes around. And there was question marks around whether that was the right thing to do. Should we have gone with the first choice midfield for the first half rather than bringing them on later in the game? Because that would have allowed us to kind of fine tune those relationships between those midfielders who are going to be tasked with supplying Viktor Gyökeres, and of course the centre forward himself. And that was a big question and a big talking point in the fallout of that game and in the aftermath of that game. Now, I'd imagine, just based on the fact that they are, in my opinion, better players, that when he's got Zubimendi and Odegaard in particular, I don't think Rice is much of a supplier in that sense, but when he's got Odegaard and Zubimendi behind him, Viktor Gyökeres, when he makes those runs that he likes to make, which are often kind of down the sides of the centre halves, as you can see now on your screen, whether that's down the right-hand side and into that channel or down the left-hand side, which I know he feels a little bit more comfortable in doing because it means that he can get on the ball and cut inside onto that stronger right foot of his. Is he going to get that ball in from those deeper areas just that little bit earlier with those players in the team? You know, whether it's coming right from deep from Zubimendi into those channels and for Gyökeres to run onto, or, you know, is it going to come from maybe Martin Odegaard, who I would like to see be given a little bit more freedom in terms of his role. I think Odegaard will be the one that probably gets closest to the box in theory, and therefore he'll be the one tasked with playing those intricate passes into those spaces for Viktor Gyökeres. Look, if I just pause on the kind of midfield influence for a minute, right? Centre forward is the position that I played, okay? And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I got anywhere near Viktor Gyökeres' level, but I played at a really good level. I played academy football, okay? So I understand that position, I would say, better than any other position on the pitch in terms of what's required. And let me tell you this, right? People keep talking about the channels, and I've been talking about it, that Gyökeres would like to run into down the sides of the centre halves. Let me tell you this, right? Every centre forward wants to operate in this space here. You don't want to be dragged right. You don't want to be dragged left. You want to be in a central area around about the penalty spot because that's where you stand the greatest chance of scoring from, okay? But that's not always possible because sometimes, you know, centre halves can do a really, really good job of cutting off the supply to you in that sort of area. So often you will do what Viktor Gyökeres does quite well, which is peel off, run down the sides of the centre back, try and take advantage of the space between the centre backs and the full backs, which is often bigger than the space between the two centre halves, in the hope that you can create an angle for yourself and you can get a shot off. Okay, so I understand this position a lot better than I do any other position on the pitch because I played it, because I've had those challenges. And again, it wasn't at the same level, but I played at a good enough level to allow that to kind of influence my view on what Viktor Gyökeres should and shouldn't be doing. And as I say, when you're playing against good centre halves, they will try and keep the distance between them to a minimum. There will not, more often than not, I beg your pardon, be a defensive midfield player that will want to sit in front of the two centre halves and try and cut off that supply line into that central area. Now, unless you've got a bionic man playing at defensive midfield, they're not going to be able to cover the entire width of the pitch. So that's why you'll see centre halves very, very often pull into those. While you'll see centre forwards, I beg your pardon, pull into those wider spaces because that means that the ball can be threaded through and that can, bypass the defensive midfield player who is going to try and screen things, but he's only going to be able to cover that sort of width, which is the width of the two centre halves, right? You can't expect your DM to go and play out at left back, and you can't expect your DM to go and play out at right back. So I think that's why strikers like to make those runs because it's easier for the midfielders to work the ball into those channels and into those spaces early. And if you've got your wingers pushed high up the pitch, your fullbacks are restricted in how much they can come in field and support the centre half in those channels and in those half spaces. So I think that's all really, really interesting stuff. You're going to see Viktor Gyökeres make those runs a lot. But the main point of my episode today, and the main point I wanted to make was, yes, you want to work him into those channels. And Viktor Gyökeres has shown himself to be a good enough finisher to take shots from those types of angles and to be successful in doing so. Yes, you want to find him from deep as early as possible because you get the ball into him nice and early. He stands a greater chance of finding that space in which he can make something happen. But there's a couple of things that we as a football team need to get used to and adapt to, because Viktor Gyökeres will play the centre forward role very, very differently to that of Kai Havertz. Now, Kai Havertz, let's say Bukayo Saka has the ball on the right-hand side and is driving infield. Often you'll see Kai Havertz just drop that little bit deeper. Okay, he'll drop that little bit deeper and he'll create an angle for Bukayo Saka to pop it off to him. Now, Bukayo Saka might lay it off to him and continue his run, in which case Havertz could be looking for the 1-2. It could be Saka that breaks into the box or Martinelli from the other side, because Kai Havertz has vacated that space. And the hope is that if Kai Havertz is doing that, he's bringing one of the defenders with him, and that is going to open up the space for your wingers to then attack, or wide forwards, if you prefer to call them that, to attack those central areas. Okay, that's what Kai Havertz brings. That's what Kai Havertz does. Can he run down the sides of centre halves? Yes, he can. Can he run in behind? Yes, he can. But predominantly, he's a drop deep type of centre forward, whereas Viktor Gyökeres isn't that guy. So when Saka comes in field carrying the ball, I don't expect Gyökeres to drop short and to go close to Saka. I expect Gyökeres to turn around and bust the gut to try and get to that penalty spot before the defenders do. And Viktor Gyökeres being in those more central positions, which I expect him to take up, is naturally going to mean that the centre halves have to go with him, and that is going to create spaces a lot of the time on the edge of the penalty area. And that's where your midfielders come in. So rather than dropping deep and into those spaces as the centre forward, what you're actually doing is you're pulling people further away from those spaces so that your Odegaards and your Declan Rices can attack the edge of the penalty area. Okay, so it's just a different way of pulling a defense apart. It's just a different way of creating spaces. The good thing about what Viktor Gyökeres does versus what someone like Kai Havertz does is that if your winger is able to beat his man and get to the byline, you've got a target right in the goal mouth. And that's what you need at times. Sometimes you'll use that player as a decoy because he would have dragged the centre halves along with him, creating that space on the edge of the box or just inside the box for someone else to arrive late. And that's where timing of runs from your midfield becomes really, really important. But sometimes you'll just be able to roll the ball across the face of goal into his path, and he'll finish from close range. Okay, so this is something that we've been missing. We've been missing that player that when Arsenal break a line, turns and runs and sprints towards the goal rather than being sort of caught in two minds at times as to whether that's the right thing to do or whether it's right to drop deep and allow the inside forward who's coming in, whether that be Saka or Martinelli, to play off of you. Okay, we're going to get a different variation of centre forward play. You're going to get different things from Viktor Gyökeres, and it's something that a lot of people would argue we've been missing for a really, really long time. But we focused a lot on the midfield and providing that supply into Gyökeres from deep, providing it early. And I think when we're playing sort of transitional based football, I think that is going to be really key. Because if you get the ball at the base of your midfield, you've just won it back, and you've got the ball at the base of your midfield, and the opposition have squeezed up against you, and you've won it back. What you can bet on is that once the turnover happens, Viktor Gyökeres, he's going to be on his bike. Okay, he's not going to come deep and show for Martin Zubimendi because that's not really his game in the way that Kai Havertz would. What Viktor Gyökeres is going to do is he's going to drag the center backs in with him initially, and you'll see here as I'm showing you on the tactics board, and then he's going to spin. He's going to spin off the shoulder, and he's going to make that run around, and that's where you need the passing range and the vision of someone like Martin Zubimendi from deep, because Zubimendi plays that ball in behind. Viktor Gyökeres has just spun off his man and made a run into that channel, and off you go. And that's what a runner in behind can give you versus what someone dropping deep can give you. Now, Kai Havertz can do that. I'm not saying he can't, but he doesn't do that naturally. That's not his natural game. Kai Havertz likes to come that little bit deeper. And I think a bit like Gabriel Jesus, he's probably more likely to drop that bit deep and create that space in behind and maybe win a flick on or act as a bit of a decoy for your sort of wingers, your Martinellis and your Sakas, to make those runs into those spaces from the wide areas. And sometimes that's the way to do it, because coming in from a wide area normally gives you the opportunity to kind of arrive into those spaces and be detected a little bit later, because it's not your sort of starting position. If you get the timing of it right, you can find yourself in loads of space. But Gyökeres is going to give us something different. But it's important that in a transitional situation, someone like Zubimendi, David Raya can do it as well, which is why he's such a useful goalkeeper for the way that we want to play. You play those balls early, because if you do that, you can bet that Viktor Gyökeres will be spinning off his man and running powerfully into those spaces. And we know that in 1v1 situations, he's a really, really accomplished finisher. Okay, so that's something different that Viktor Gyökeres brings, but that's something we've got to be prepared to take advantage of as a team when he's in the side versus Kai Havertz. So the supply from deep is really, really important. We've talked about that quite a bit. I think the wingers, though, are just as important in this, if not more important, than what you're going to get in terms of service directly from Zubi or Odegaard or Rice when they're in those deeper midfield positions. I think the wingers hold the key to unlocking Viktor Gyökeres. And I was watching the game against Villarreal the other day, right? And I couldn't help but think, how would Viktor Gyökeres have looked if he was playing at centre forward at the point Max Dowman was playing on the right-hand side? Now, Max Dowman's a kid. He's 15 years old. You don't want to put too much pressure on him. But his ability to beat a player is just incredible. And I've said for a long, long time that that's what Arsenal as a team lack. It's why I want the likes of Eberechi Eze. It's why I think Arsenal went for Noni Madueke, because they've recognized too that they need dribblers. They need people that can skip past challenges. Because you beat a man that comes out to confront you, you've breached the line. Automatically, you've breached the line. You skip past someone, you're in space. And if someone else comes to commit, and that means that you decide that you can't go again, and instead you pop the ball square, or you play the ball forwards, fine. You've dribbled past one. What you've done is committed a second, and then you've taken two players out of the game, two defenders out of the game. So this is really, really important, and it's something that Arsenal have been missing for a long, long time. But you think about this shape that I'm going to show you now on the tactics board, right? Generally, we play up against back fours. Sometimes we'll play up against back fives as well, but the same kind of principles apply. Now, if Viktor Gyökeres is occupying that centre forward space in between the two centre halves, and Bukayo Saka receives the ball on the right hand side, let's say we're playing against a sort of lowish block here with a back four, two defensive midfielders, and then everybody else sort of in their own half, trying to limit and reduce the spaces Arsenal have to operate in. And the opposition are lined up on the edge of their penalty area, right? They're trying desperately to keep you at arm's length. And Bukayo Saka receives the ball out on the right-hand side. Now, the winger's going to come back, you'd imagine, and try and support his fullback. You're going to get Martin Odegaard drifting out there to try and support Bukayo Saka, as he does. Ben White's probably going to join in at some point as well, because those three are really good at kind of forming those triangles out on the right-hand side for Arsenal. But often, I think our first thought is, okay, let's try and cut inside. I'm Bukayo Saka. I'm going to try and cut inside because I want to work the ball onto my stronger left foot. And this is where the Noni Madueke signing comes in here. And I know this will be, applicable if we're talking about the left when we're talking about Noni Madueke. But our wingers have got to have a bit more variety in their game. It can't just be about trying to cut inside onto your stronger foot, whether that's Martinelli on the left or Bukayo Saka on the right. There's got to be more variety to what we're doing. So if Bukayo Saka was able to beat his man and go down the line, a bit like Max Dowman did 3-4 times in that very short period of time that he was on the pitch against Villarreal, once you've beaten the fullback, you've stretched things. You've caused the opposition all sorts of problems because now the fullback's beaten. Okay, he's beaten. So one of the centre halves that is now occupying that space on the edge of the box, and one of the centre halves who's got an eye on Viktor Gyökeres, what does he do? And the way that you create spaces against opposition sides, the way you create problems for the opposition is by forcing them into making quick decisions. Okay, you force someone into making quick decisions, sometimes they'll make the wrong ones. And so this centre half now, who I'm highlighting on my screen, the left centre half, Bukayo Saka's just beaten the fullback and he's making a dart for the byline. What does he do? Does he go out and confront Bukayo Saka? I suppose he has to. in which case Viktor Gyökeres has now lost one of the centre halves that was keeping tabs on him and now has more space to operate in. And what Bukayo Saka then has to do is try and find Viktor Gyökeres. Okay. Alternatively, if the centre half doesn't go and confront Bukayo Saka's got the room and the option of driving in on the goal. And we know from that angle, he can either fire off a shot, he can cut it back to someone else. Again, you want your midfielders, your Odegaards and your Rices, when they sense this is happening, to make those runs towards the edge of the box and to box crash, in case something falls their way, or in case Bukayo Saka picks one of them out, uses Viktor Gyökeres as a decoy, which we've already discussed. But the reason I wanted to highlight this is because we talk so much about post Villarreal. We talked so much about the midfield not being the right midfield to supply Viktor Gyökeres. And I think that was true. I said it myself. It was my opinion too. But I think the key to unlocking Viktor Gyökeres is getting your wingers in the situations where they can take on their men and beat their men. Because once you've beaten the fullback, the centre halves have no choice but to try and cover. Now, if a team's got 3 centre halves, they'll probably find it easier to cover this type of situation, but it's still not ideal for any defense. No centre halves want to be pulled apart. Okay, the art of defending in a lot of ways is about keeping small, compact, manageable spaces between you. And the minute that you pull one out of them out of position, that causes all sorts of chaos. And that's where then you rely on someone like Viktor Gyökeres' instinct and ability to kind of understand where the ball could fall, to take up the right spaces. And in time, he will develop that kind of understanding with his teammates. They'll understand what kind of movement Viktor Gyökeres is going to make. Does he want to go to the near post? Does he want to go to the far post? Is he going to hold back and wait on the penalty spot? Do you see what I mean? That type of relationship, that sort of telepathic understanding of what each other are going to do, that comes with time and that comes with playing with each other. But the more our wingers can beat their fullbacks and get to the byline, leading to centre backs having to shuffle across in order to cover. Because if you don't, you just let Bukayo Saka run through on your goal. And who wants that to happen against them? So the more our wingers can beat their men, and that means we got to work the ball into them early to enable them to do that, right? So one of the problems that I felt that we had at times last season, particularly, and the season before, at points when Thomas Partey didn't play, was that I felt that it just took us too long at times to get the ball into Saka or to get the ball into Martinelli. And one of the great things about Martin Zubimendi is he's really good at progressing the ball early, sometimes with one touch. There was a compilation going around of him the other day, post Villarreal, and I think of the 8 touches that or of the 8 passes that this compilation showed him playing, 6 of them were played first time. And that's what you want, because if you can work the ball into those guys early, you're limiting the opposition's ability to double up on those players. Now, if it's a 1v1 and you don't give them time to double up, your Sakas and your Martinellis or your Dalmans or your Nwaneris or your Maduekes, whoever it is that plays wide, has a far greater chance of doing exactly what I've described, which is beating the man and getting into a space where they can drive towards goal, and Viktor Gyökeres can then do his thing, whether that be get on the end of the chance and finish it yourself, or creating that space, creating that distraction that a false 9 just won't, because they're not in those areas and they don't have that instinct. They don't have that kind of, desire to kind of attack the goal head on every single time. Then you either create space for someone else or you get on the end of the chance and you finish it yourself. And that, for me, is the key to unlocking Viktor Gyökeres. We can talk about what the midfield need to do, and the midfield will, at times, need to go direct into Gyökeres, hit those channels that he likes to operate in nice and early. But more often than not, we're going to face low blocks. And so the key for the midfield, for me, is that they work it into the wingers or into Odegaard or into anybody else in Arsenal's advanced positions early. You put the ball into people early, that gives the opposition less time to adjust. And if they've got less time to adjust, you're more often going to find yourself in 1v1s. Win those 1v1s. And that's what we haven't done enough for me in the last year or so. And obviously, you need to create the situation whereby there is a 1v1, first of all, to be able to execute this. But when you get into those situations, there can't be hesitation. You can't have your winger put his foot on the ball, stop and then look back inside and wait for Odegaard in Saka's case or Rice to arrive in Martinelli's case and then just roll it inside to them slowly. Things have got to be done with tempo, with accuracy, and there's got to be a ruthlessness about the way we attack, a directness. And that is the key to unlocking Viktor Gyökeres for me, because if the fullback is beaten, the centre half goes into kind of red alert mode. What do? Do I go and confront Bukayo Saka, who's now charging diagonally towards my goal? Well, I'm going to have to. But if I'm going to have to do that, I'm increasing the space between me and my central defensive partner, and therefore I'm affording more space to the centre forward. And as I say, the centre forward might not always be the guy that finishes off the chance. But being a forward-thinking, goal-obsessed centre forward and wanting to get as close to goal as possible, that's going to drag people with you. And so if your runners are right and your runners get their timing right, you can cause teams all sorts of problems. This, for me, is where Arsenal have gone wrong. It's been a bit too slow. It's been a bit lethargic. And I can kind of excuse that because it's pre-season and players are still building their way up to fitness. But against Athletic Club, I think we could all do with just seeing that machine work a little bit more efficiently and with a little bit more tempo. And if we do, and then we've got a nice long week to build up to that game at Old Trafford next Sunday, then why can't we go there and blow them away? We're a much better side than them. But there are certain adjustments, certain tweaks that need to be made tactically for me. And the only way you're going to do that is by going out there and putting it to practice. Now, there was a few people over the course of the last few days that suggested that maybe the reason Mikel picked the midfield that he did against Villarreal alongside Viktor Gyökeres was because, he feels that this is going to work. That is his midfield. He's working on it in training, and maybe he didn't want to put it out into the public domain, like give Man United video footage to study, etc., etc. Maybe that's the case. Maybe that's the case. But I want to see those adjustments. I want to see those tweaks. I think a lot of our creativity problems are not necessarily because we're not good enough, but they are a lot of the time because the tempo's not high enough. And if you've got players like Zubimendi who can ping passes from deep and aren't going to take 15 touches before they move the ball forward, that is only going to help. I think we could do with a slight adjustment to our midfield shape. I think that would also really, really help us. And the adjustment that I'd like to see made, and I've talked about this quite a bit over the summer, is that I'd like to see Declan Rice not drop deep. I don't want to see Declan Rice become a DM, but I'd like him to sort of partner Zubimendi a little bit more, allowing Zubimendi to step that 5-10 yards further forward, because I think he's got the passing range to really do damage to the opposition. And if he's got Declan Rice closer to him, with Declan Rice's athleticism and ability to cover, that just allows Zubimendi, as I say, to take those 5-10 yards on and be able to progress the ball into those dangerous areas nice and early. Because I think Zubimendi has that. Declan Rice maybe doesn't. I'm probably relying on Declan Rice's athleticism a little bit more, but I think that's one of his biggest strengths. So why not lean on that and allow Zubimendi to show off one of his biggest strengths, which is his passing range? I just think that little adjustment would improve the dynamic of our midfield. And I want to see Martin Odegaard get close to Gyökeres. I want to see Martin Odegaard carrying the ball towards the opposition box, allowing Gyökeres to spin off of his centre-halves one way or the other, and knowing that I've got a player in that area that has the technical ability and the vision to execute those killer passes. And all of a sudden, you'll see Viktor Gyökeres scoring goals galore, and you'll see Martin Odegaard racking up assists galore. So for me, that's the adjustment I would make in terms of the midfield shape. But I think in terms of unlocking Viktor Gyökeres, it's about feeding him in the right spaces early from deep in transitional game states, but also enabling the wingers to get into those 1v1 situations, beat their men, and that will, by default, create space for Viktor Gyökeres and our midfield runners. Those are the tweaks I would make. That is how, in my opinion, you unlock Viktor Gyökeres. That is how you get the best out of Arsenal's big money striker going into the new campaign. Thank you all so much for watching, for listening. Really, really do appreciate it. If you are an audio listener and you fancy watching me move all the counters around on my little tactics board, come over to the YouTube video and check it out. Make sure that you like the video and that you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. We're not a million miles away from hitting that 45K subs on YouTube milestone that we wanted to get to by the start of the season. We're about a week out. I think we're about 270 away, I want to say, which isn't impossible to achieve. Might be tough in the space of the next few days, but it's not impossible. So like, subscribe, click the little bell icon. That will turn on notifications. That way you'll never miss an episode. And if you'd like to join us on Patreon, you can do so. Patreon.com/The Chronicles of Aguna. The link is in the description below. We've got some Patreon content coming your way later today as well. So thanks for joining us, and I will see you all very soon. Until the next one, take care of yourselves. All the best. Goodbye.